Representative Finch and Senator Tyson for joining us this morning. This is the Legislative Coffee sponsored by the Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank additional sponsors that we have, Franklin County Farm Bureau Association and AT&T. Couple just housekeeping items. We do have folks with us live today, which is nice to see people in person. So anyone that's here present with us, just make sure your phones are on silent or turned off, so we respect the candidates talking when we ask questions. We have submitted questions that were emailed to us over the week, so we'll try to touch on as many of those as possible, and we'll also have some questions from the audience this morning as well. Just one reminder that, we do appreciate both of you being here. This is a treat for us to have as a community to be able to engage with our legislators. And so, when we're asking questions, I just ask to keep it brief. Let's stay on point and ask a question, and let's try to just refrain from making too many statements or comments, and give us all time to hear and respond to the questions and the work you all have been doing and speak at this session. So that said, let's get started. Let me start with a question that was submitted, and I think this is just a good general topic. And by the way, I'm not going to start with introduction. We'll give you each some time at the end just to kind of do a wrap up. So I want to start with this question first, and Senator Tyson, I'll just let you begin first, and if you could try to keep your comments around 3 minutes on this question. What bill during this session was the hardest to decide on when it came to your vote?
To decide on? That's an interesting question. Most bills, in fact, you guys have heard me say it, that you can tell how I'm going to vote based off of how I campaigned. And I wish that we had more legislators that would do the same thing. They kind of forget what they told their constituents during a campaign. I'm going to talk about a bill that I actually tried to stop, but we couldn't convince a majority of legislators. It was securitization for utility plants. And you guys may not hear about it, you may not know about it, but it is an initial step for utility companies to close down their facilities, their plants. And what it does is it puts it on the taxpayers' back. We have to now pay for the bonding. We have to pay for the closing of the plant. And we all know what happened in Texas with the utilities. People actually died, froze to death during that major freeze. Renewable, I understand the solar and wind, but the reality is it cannot sustain us, especially in times of extreme weather. So whether you like it or not, you need the coal plants, the nuclear plant, or natural gas. And that's what I'm going to be working on, is to try, hopefully, that they don't shut the coal plant or that we can convert to natural gas. But we must keep those utility plants open.
Thank you.
I think for me, this on, can you hear me? I think one of the toughest things is always the budget every year. And, I know that you think that should be an easy vote. There's stuff in there all the time, but I look at the trajectory of the state and where spending is going. The education funding piece will be passed at some point this session, and you'll be looking at an all-funds budget over $20 billion for the state of Kansas, and with a lot of spending in it. So, the last few years, the budgets that have been proposed have really been unsustainable for a lot of our state institutions, and the legislatures had to do the hard work of putting some of those funds back in. Sometimes I think they go too far, and there's more spending in there than there should be, and spending in ways that are not great. We do have some good improvements this year. We put some teeth behind the zero-based budgeting or priority-based budgeting approach that we've had in there for several years. We have made strides for Osawatomie State Hospital. I know the senators worked hard on that. So there are some good things, but overall that's always a tough vote because you really have to try to weigh and balance, and I know that for both of us, we take seriously our obligation to try to get that right. And I don't know, this year's budget vote was just harder for me because it is crossing that threshold, and it's a big deal. And it's got to be on a path that's sustainable, that we can continue to afford the services that we're providing and not drown Kansans in taxes.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask a question. It was actually the first email question we received earlier this week, and then after this, I'm going to pass the mic down to our audience. I know there's some live questions that are going to be asked next. So there's many scientific studies that document that prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision making, doesn't really mature in humans until 20s. So the nature of this question is to talk about House Bill 2058, which allows 18-year-olds to conceal and carry a loaded weapon. Because these skills sometimes are still developing in teens, then allows them to maybe engage in risky behavior. Can you discuss the reasoning and purpose of this bill? And I'll start with you, Blaine.
Sure. So the reciprocity concept is not new. We've talked about this for several years. The Attorney General has asked us to look at this. Kansas has a concealed carry permit that someone can apply for and be able to concealed carry with their permit. The problem occurs when somebody from Kansas goes to another state that may have concealed carry permit legislation, but the standards don't match up. So states on numerous issues engage in reciprocity, whether it's professional licensing, or we have compacts where if you're an audiologist in one state, you get to be an audiologist in any other state that's part of the compact. So reciprocity is nothing new. The Attorney General's been trying to get reciprocity for concealed carry permit holders for a long time. One of the tangential issues that comes up with that is some states allow concealed carry permit holders to be adult teens, 18, 19 years old, and 20-year-olds. And so what happens then when those states, if we have reciprocity, if those states, a 19-year-old with a concealed carry permit from Texas comes to Kansas, they can legally carry concealed, but a Kansan similarly situated could not. And so this is designed to address that. I would note that this is 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds can constitutionally carry firearms in the state of Kansas. That's part of our constitutional right. This is only to allow for concealed carry, and it can only be done with training and proper qualification to do so. So the same standards apply that apply for anybody who gets a concealed carry permit. And then I would say that, what we heard often in this debate is that 18, 19, 20-year-olds can be drafted, are required to register with Selective Service, and can be sent off to fight and die in the military. And this is one of their constitutional rights to possess firearms. And it didn't make a lot of sense that they would be deprived of that right only until they were 21.
Thank you, Mr. Finch. Senator Tyson, do you want to comment on that?
I would just reiterate what what Representative Finch said. It absolutely was about reciprocity and the 18-year-olds that serve in the military being able to conceal carry.
Thank you both. Do we have a question from the audience?
I'm Darrell McCune. As of April 12th, only 5,390 people in Franklin County have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. We have a population of 25,544 currently, so that's about 21% of the people have been vaccinated. Scientists have indicated that it'll take about 70% of the population to be vaccinated in order to reach herd immunity. Without reaching that goal, we have the risk of the disease continuing to run rampant. And so one of the biggest problems is to convince those that are refusing to take the vaccine to do so. So as leaders here in our state, what measures will you use to encourage reluctant people to do what is best for society at large?
Do you want me to? Sure. That's an interesting question and a little bit pointed on the perspective. In fact, all we have to do is look to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was just recently pulled off of the shelf for health reasons. The vaccines literally state that they are not approved by FDA, that they are still experimental, and we need to make sure that each individual knows their health. and they know what their parameters are between them and their healthcare professional, they should decide whether they should take the vaccine or not.
I think two things are happening there, Daryl, to your question. When I spoke last with the county health department, we had about 2,400 people on the waiting list, and that would have been, I don't know, roughly a week before your conversation maybe, or the stats that you got. We had doses curtailed to our county. We were getting 400 doses a week. We were getting half that. One week we got none. So it's very hard when the vaccine supply chain is disrupted for people to get vaccines. I think that what we know from social psychology, what we know from public health, is that you cannot browbeat people into making a health decision. We need to make the facts known. We need to encourage people to review those facts and make their own decision. We need to highlight things like, the size of the trials for some of the vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna, talking, almost 100,000 people. The nation of Israel became kind of a longitudinal study for the Pfizer vaccine and the success of it there. We need to encourage people to get those facts and look into them, and I continue to do that all the time. I tell people, look into it. Do your research, find out for yourself, go to credible sources, and sift through the information and decide if this is the right choice for you. And if it is, don't delay in getting it, because I do think it's the path to get out of having to socially distance and wear masks is to have enough people vaccinated that we get that transmissibility factor below 1, and this virus begins to die out. So, but me telling someone to do it, or the senator telling someone to do it, isn't going to make them do it. They've got to want to do that, and they've got to want to go research it for themselves, and I encourage people to do that.
Thank you both. This is another submitted topic. Can you both talk about the bill that both the House and Senate passed to the governor that prohibits transgender girls from participating in female sports, leagues, and teams? Neither chamber passed the bill with enough votes to override a veto. How important do you think this issue is to the people of Kansas? And Representative Finch, I'll let you start with this one.
This is a complicated issue. The issue of transgender athletics, the International Olympic Committee, the NCAA, international bodies like cycling and weightlifting, they struggle with this question. And how do you ensure a fair and level playing field in women's sports? In this country, we've got almost 50 years. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of Title IX. An attempt to try to have a fair and level playing field for women's athletics. We've also seen an increasing number of high-profile cases, like the one from Connecticut, where a young athlete competed in the men's track team and then in the women's track team within the same calendar year. There's a story of a weightlifter in the Pan-Pacific Games who was transgender, who competed and who won. And so these stories, are kind of running headlong into that goal of ensuring that we have fairness and equity and competition in women's sports. And so the folks who brought that bill, that's what I think they were looking for. There was a much longer debate on the Senate side about the bill, and obviously in the building we listen to some of the debates on either side, and that was the theme that kept coming up time and again, is that what became Senate Bill 55. The goal was to try to ensure that equitable competition. Now, do we have it right? Probably not. The IOC is going to change their guidelines after the Tokyo Olympics, and I suspect this is an area where we'll continue to see the rules and regulations and laws change over time as we come to understand the situation. But what we can't allow is for biological males to compete against girls. That would undo all of the progress of the last 49 years.
And Representative Finch was absolutely correct. The debate in the Senate, actually we got to debate it a couple of times, but it digressed, and it was interesting because during the debate, the ranking minority leader used language that is deemed inappropriate in the legislature a lot of times at the microphone, at least in the Senate. And so it was interesting because about 8 senators turned and looked at me, and I thought each one of you could stand up and say something, But I did stand up and ask that the decorum be respected in the Senate chamber. And thankfully, the ranking knew right away what she did, and she apologized, and we continue the debate. This is an issue that is very heated, very emotional, and I appreciated the professionalism on both sides once there was a statement made. So the debate was aggressive. It is an important piece of legislation. It may not seem like it to many individuals, but to girls that are competing in sports and trying to get scholarships and other items, it is an issue. And to me, the issue is much bigger than just athletics. If you look, we have businesses and companies threatening to not come to certain states that do pass this legislation. We are losing our freedom of speech. We are losing our freedom to govern. And we must stand up to these corporations and decide, you know, I use this, you've heard the Reagan quote, the shining city on the hill. We need to be the shining state in the nation. We need to be the example of freedom and liberty and stand for what our founding fathers believed in and established our state and our nation.
I want to ask just a quick follow-up on this conversation as part of some of the questions we received. But and when you think about some of the debates that happened in both of your houses over this bill, was there any conversation around the idea that this could be discriminatory in any way from people that choose to have the transgender lifestyle?
You know, I think in both chambers, those allegations were made by folks who opposed the bill. I think the important thing is, as I watched the debate in our chamber and listened to some of it in the Senate chamber, I don't see or sense a desire in any of the advocates for that bill to discriminate or to treat people poorly. Bullying is not okay. Treating people badly because you disagree with who they are or what they believe is not okay. And that's part of what the point that the senator was making, and it's part of, quite frankly, I think what's wrong with our politics today is that we are quick to accuse people of things, we are quick to attack people, we are quick to turn to snark and sarcasm instead of really seeking to understand. You know, I remember when I was in school and we were learning about arguments and debate, you know, you couldn't really debate someone until you could state their position as well or better than they could. And we've lost some of that. We want to quickly point fingers and name call, and this person's a label, and instead of actually engaging in a debate about the merits of the question, whether we like the question or not. And so, yeah, to your question, did that come up? Yes, it came up. But again, I didn't sense in the debate people trying to be discriminatory or wanting to inflict pain or cause harm to anyone. I didn't see anyone saying we think someone should be bullied or treated badly.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. It's not about discrimination at all. You know, you treat others how you want to be treated, and we treat them respectfully. And, you know, it was even suggested that there's another sports program set up for those individuals to compete. I know that might be difficult because of numbers, but it's something that could happen. Not saying that you want them to stop from competing, but you need the fairness against biological women and biological men. There is a difference, you know, and I think you gave an example with the weightlifting. That's an excellent example. I cannot bench what my husband benches, although I would love to. It's just not feasible. And so we just need to be practical and like he said, the discrimination, we are just very quick to judge in a very heated conversation these days. And I think we can lead by example by lowering the temperature and the inflammatory language. You know, it's become common and it should be uncommon. Hopefully we can have these discussions in a very civil. Sometimes we'll agree to disagree, but I think the debate is critical and that it's a cordial and congenial professional debate on all of these subjects.
Thank you both for that. Do we have another question from the audience?
For several years, the legislature has referred to the Kansas Supreme Court as activist judges. How do you respond, your branch of government, to now being called activists as you try to amass more power in the legislative branch of our government?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to start?
Yeah, and it's fine. You'll do better, you're a lawyer, but I don't see the legislature, we are activists because that's what our branch of government is supposed to be. In fact, that we create and write legislation. And it is the judicial branch that is to interpret and enforce that legislation. Our judicial branch has way overstepped. I can give so many examples, but one of the prime ones that stands out for me is when we had an illegal immigrant that stole somebody's identity in Kansas, and the Kansas Supreme Court ruled that he could not be prosecuted by the state. This would have had national implications. It was devastating, and thankfully our Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, took it to the U.S. Supreme Court and had it overturned. It just is mind-boggling to me that if you break Kansas law, our Supreme Court said that you could not be prosecuted because it was a federal case. No, we have state law that says you cannot steal somebody's identity. So therefore, if you do that, you should be prosecuted under state law. Like I said, just think about how that could have gone if that wasn't overturned. Our Supreme Court is rogue, and I know that most people are referring to the 2015 legislation that was passed, dismemberment abortion. It passed by supermajority. It was signed by the governor into law. And our Supreme Court decides that they found the language that dismemberment abortion is legal by the words in our state constitution. I challenge anybody to go read that state constitution and find those words. And in fact, Justice Siegel, in his dissenting opinion, wrote that this, and I'm paraphrasing, that it is more devastating of what they are doing to our government structure by this ruling. It is so far outreaching, basically, that they are legislating from the bench, and it must be stopped. So whether the amendment that will be on the state constitution, August 2nd, 2022, will be, do you think that the courts or that the legislature should have the right to legislate abortion law? I hope that every Kansan voter votes yes, because that is the right of the legislature, is to write law.
I think we have to talk about what we mean when we talk about a court being an activist court, and it is that. It's basically that they are creating law, finding rights that may not have been foreseen or discussed before, and creating new law from the bench. That's not the role of the court system in our republic. It is the role of the courts to interpret the laws that are there. It is the role of the legislature to make those laws, and of course the executive branch to enforce those laws. We have gotten away from that in many ways. And I am a big fan of, I'm on team legislature right now. That's the job you all sent me there to do. I think the governor has had too much power, not just this one, but prior ones of both parties. We see it at the national level. We have what commentators and political scientists call almost an imperial presidency now. And Congress is not doing what it should be doing in terms of legislating and working together to pass laws. So when a court comes in and says we're going to find new rights in the Constitution that there's no way the founders anticipated 150 years ago, or when the court changes course dramatically dramatically from the 1990s to 2008 and 9 from the USD 229 case to the Montoy case, and says school funding is a political question for the appropriators under Article 2 of the Constitution in the 90s, and then less than 20 years later says, no, we're going to tell you exactly how much you need to appropriate for schools, to 10 years later saying, we're not going to tell you the exact number, but we'll tell you when you get there, and then we're going to mandate that you not only do it, but you do it indexed to inflation forever. Those are huge changes. Whether you agree with them or not, they're huge changes. And that leads to a charge that the court has somehow become activist, because they've gone from staying out of what was a political question to dictating that we're going to intercede, and we're going to intercede with a specific number, to we're going to make you write a bigger check every year in perpetuity. If a citizen is going to have one branch of their government be activist, I would argue you'd want it to be the legislative branch, because that's the one you get to vote on. That's the one you can make a decision about. In my case, every 2 years. In the senator's case, every 4 years. You get a retention vote every 6 years on a Supreme Court justice, and there is no competition. Shall this justice be retained? That's the question you get to weigh in on. And in some ways, you need that judicial independence. That's part of how the system is set up. At the federal level, those judges are appointed for life if they're an Article 3 judge. But with that great power comes the great responsibility to not overstep and write laws from the bench. That's the legislature's function, and I support and will continue to fight for that separation of powers. And the legislature should be active and vigilant in carving out its sphere of authority under the state constitution that the people have approved.
Thank you both. Senator Tyson, you cited an example of stolen identity a little bit ago. And I know both House and Senate passed the labor jobless bill, which allows the state to replace 40-year-old computers and systems that handle the unemployment compensation programs. Obviously, that was a major problem with our state during the pandemic, and this bill gives your legislation a lot of oversight on how those funds are invested in these new systems. So the question is, now that that bill has passed, what efforts do you see legislation taking to make sure the proper improvements are made with those funds? And Senator Tyson, I'll let you start if you want.
Thank you. I worked diligently on this bill. In fact, a few days in the legislature, I was up there before 5:30 a.m. trying to get the language on this, trying to get good amendments to the bill. One thing is, it doesn't allow for a software system. It mandates a software system to be updated, which is a good thing. This, for those of you that aren't aware, this issue has been going on since the 70s. There was money allocated under the Sebelius administration in order to upgrade the system. It did not occur. The next administration, there was money allocated, and I'm not sure why they didn't upgrade the system. They were an attempt to, and then when the current administration was elected, they threw out all of the previous administration's work and started from scratch. So here we are 2.5 years later, no system update. So it's been a known issue. It just became known to the public in such an extensive way because of the unemployment filings and the fraudulent filings. We were told there was a 10-day period in the nation that Kansas had the most fraudulent claims filed than any other state in the nation. And that's because we didn't have the checks and balances for fraud. I've been talking about this for years, asking for implementation on it. Finally, we even asked the administration to shut the system down and to do it manually this summer. It would have been more effective and more efficient than the current system. We would have had less fraud cases. It's a major issue. So what is disappointing with the current administration and you guys may not know, my background is software and IT and implementing new systems like this. I've had experience myself, and some of you may know Senator Holland is also in IT. We were both in agreement on how the administration would move forward on this, and I told the administration that I would back them up. They needed to find a state that had a working system, find the best system they possibly could for the state of Kansas, sole source that system. They said, oh, we can't sole source. We said we wouldn't do that. No, we will stand up publicly and support you for sole sourcing that system. We would have a proven methodology and technology and migrate that system to Kansas. What common sense would that be? But no, they put it out for bid. So instead of getting that system as soon as possible, they have delayed it for at least another, well, we know the bids aren't due until May, and then they have to review the bids, then there has to be a Q&A, so we're looking at least 2 months, maybe 3 months delay. This is unacceptable. I think that a lot of times we have people in positions that they want those positions for the title, but they may not understand the work and the experience that is needed to deliver. And we need somebody to deliver on this. I mean, it's pretty, speaks volumes when you have two opposing. I mean, he's very liberal, I am very conservative, but we were both in agreement on this. So one thing that we were able to get in the bill is an oversight committee that it's made up of lay people, legislators, and others that will be the major stakeholder for this system. Hopefully that will give input and help guide this process in a manner that can expedite results for the state of Kansas. One disappointing thing that was put in the bill, actually two things on the Senate floor. One was there's not just do you have the oversight of the council now, they put another layer of the LCC. And I understand why they thought they needed that, but with a software project, an IT project, all that does is creates another layer of communication, bogs down the system for people that are not intimately involved with the system of what's going on with the process, where they're at with time and materials. So it was just another delay to the system. Hopefully the LCC will be able to help expedite the process as much as possible, but it is an issue. As far as the funding in the bill, the House had taken a great position, and I had actually took their position and put an amendment on the bill in committee, and it passed. And when we got to the floor, the chairman decided to roll it back to what the governor's position was, and we wanted to shore up funds for the unemployment system. We know that there's been an issue with fraud. The last thing we want to do is have that run out of money and have to borrow money in order to shore up the funds for our unemployment system. The businesses that were shut down, that have been taxed, if that money is not shored up for that system, then it will come back on us, the taxpayers and the business owners and individuals. And you want that money to be there because people need it more than ever, the unemployment system right now. So why you wouldn't shore those funds up is just beyond me. And we were attempting to use CARES money that was available, federal money. And it's the same thing, why the governor did not use the federal money to shore up the software development last year is beyond me. But we're past that, let's move forward, let's get the best system possible for the state of Kansas.
Yeah, I just want to give a huge amount of credit to Representative Sean Tarwater from Johnson County. He is the chair of the House Commerce and Labor and Economic Development Committee, and he has really worked on this issue for months. I mean, before session, he was working on this issue, and he's kind of the architect of House Bill 2196, which is the UI bill. No more frequent issue is in my inbox and on our phones than people calling unable to get their unemployment benefits. And these are heart-wrenching stories of people who have lost a car, may have lost a place that they're living. They are desperate. It is no exaggeration to say we have people saying, I have contemplated suicide because I cannot get the benefits that I'm entitled to. And I can't provide for my family, I can't provide for myself, I can't pay any of my bills. It's not just that payments are a week late, it's that payments in some cases have not been received for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, some longer than that. People get money in fits and drabs, it's never the same amount. people are cleared from fraud, and then they turn around and there's now a new fraud tag back on their account. This should not be this way. And the administration has had months, we're now going into the second year of this pandemic to get this right, and it's still not right. And I do think that the delay in the IT system is unfortunate, because I've pushed for a new IT system to make our legislative IT better, more accessible to the public, more transparent, more efficient. And I'm told that's a 6-year process, which I flatly rejected and said, no, that's too far, it's too long. But I'm afraid that what we're going to get is that same kind of creep with this unemployment improvement that's mandated in this bill, that it's going to just stretch out and stretch out and stretch out, and we'll end up with a system that is not in place and certainly not helping the people who need it. So incredibly disappointed in what's happened, incredibly proud of people like Representative Tarwater and others. And I know Senator Tyson worked on this too, and we in the House leadership have been huge advocates for trying to get something done as quickly as possible for people.
Yeah, and if I may, Representative Tarwater was an absolute leader in this. He has been stellar. I was able to work with him on a committee this summer, but he has been the driving force. I've just been support staff. So I do appreciate everything he's done, and that he's allowed me to work on it with him and others too. It was great legislation, and thank you to the House for doing that heavy lift.
Did we have another question from the audience?
In light of the 2020 census, I'm assuming that the Kansas districts will be redistricted again, and also congressional districts. When will that happen, and can you tell us a little bit more about the specifics of that? I know the last time it seemed like the legislature didn't do the job, and they ended up having the courts do it, I think, if I'm correct. So what's the plan on that?
Sure. So redistricting happens every 10 years. It happens in the 2 years after the decennial census comes out. Unfortunately, we still don't have the census numbers from 2020. We had actually hoped to have them back in January or February so that we could do some of the head work on this project then. It doesn't look like we're going to get them till September, which will really shrink the timetable a lot. Typically what happens, we have a small advisory group that's made up of legislative leadership in both chambers that kind of set the rules for redistricting. That is, we bring in the court cases, we talk about communities of interest and compact as geographically possible, all of those legal standards for redistricting. And then we get into, in years past there have been rules. We try not to draw incumbents into the same district. We try to respect lines that have been established for a long time. That kind of thing. Then there's a committee in each house that works on redistricting. Ours is chaired by Representative Chris Croft out of Johnson County. I think the President Masterson is actually going to chair the Senate's committee. They will be part of a joint committee that will, they used to go around the state physically and hold town halls. With the pandemic, I assume they're going to do more of that virtually. And they would hear from different communities. What do you have in common with this end of your district? Is there a better, companion piece to this district? Is this too large? Is it not compact enough? That kind of thing. So they'll go around and hear from everybody over the off session, and then the committees will begin their work next session in January, putting maps together. The House typically puts its maps together for its districts. The Senate puts its districts together, or maps together for its districts. And then both will discuss the constitutional or the congressional districts, the 4 that we have here in the state. When that's done, the law says that the Attorney General is then supposed to take that to the court, take those maps to the court, and seek an opinion on whether or not they pass constitutional muster. So that's kind of the last step in the process. What happened 10 years ago is the House and Senate deadlocked. There was a little bit of playing in each other's sandbox and wanting to tell the other house kind of what their district should look like. They ended up deadlocking, and it went to federal court, which redrew the lines, and that's why it's kind of why I'm here. We had maps come out on a Friday, and they said you've got to file to run for office by Monday at noon. So You talk about a scramble, that was a big day. We remember we were having a chamber coffee over at the new Juvenile Detention Center when those maps came out, and my phone started ringing, and I'm sure yours was too, and people saying, hey, have you looked at this district or that district? So that's the process in a nutshell. That's kind of how it works. It's built to have a lot of public input. It's built to have the committees work in these things in public so that people can come and see, and you'll see a ton of maps by the time this is all done. Everybody wants a map created, and I know that Chairman Croft is working on how to limit that because he's told the software is 4 hours per map. So,
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting issue, and it's actually a hot button for me. One of the items was the U.S. Census itself. I had a resolution, and the Senate President last year chose not to run it, but it was a resolution requesting that the U.S. Census count citizens and non-residents, or residents that are not citizens, so that we would know the total amount of people, but that we would redistrict based on citizenship. You may not realize it, but when the President of the United States opens up the border and allows people to come in that are illegal immigrants, they are counted now currently in our U.S. Census. Well, that may all sound great and dandy, but if you're one of the states that is losing a U.S. congressman as a result of that, it's not great and dandy. And especially Kansas has been on the border of losing a U.S. representative. We've lost him in the past, and we are at risk of losing one again. So these counts are critical to us and our representation, not only at the U.S. level, but at the state level also. So it is actually quite disappointing that the U.S. government did not have the census data. Last year should have been the easiest year to count. Most people stayed home for quite some time. It should have been a very simple count last year. But instead, we get a delay. The first delay was said, well, we'll get the data in April to you. Oh, guess what? Now we're not getting the data until September. Well, to me, why? That looks like fuzzy data. Why the delay? Why can't we get the information now? It makes no sense. And, you know, you've heard the Marx quote. It's rather harsh, but somewhat it's true. He who counts the votes wins. Well, is the data going to be accurate when we do receive it? I've got a friend that kind of jokes around, we should have MasterCard and Visa actually do the census count because they can tell you where everybody is in the nation at one point. And you guys, I know that's a joke, but there's some seriousness to it too. With the technology and the data that we have now in our nation, this count should be more accurate than ever. And I'm just discouraged that we're not getting the data until September. And as Representative said, it is going to put us under the gun. And in a situation where accuracy and I would say, as he said, there's so many items that go into it. I just want a fair representation for our state and for our nation. And that's why I demand accurate data in order to get that.
Thank you both. We have about 20 minutes left, so on this next question, this is another question we had submitted to us earlier this week by email. And I'll maybe try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes each, but there has been some discussion this session over the symbols used on license plates, and specifically the Gadsden flag or the Don't Tread on Me flag, which some find offensive. This has stalled the license tag bill and from finding agreement in both houses. Where do you believe a solution lies for this impasse? And Senator Tyson, I'll let you start.
You know, it was an interesting debate, and I don't know if you guys are aware of Senator Haley. He serves in the Kansas legislature. He's a Democrat from Wyandotte County. His uncle actually wrote the book Roots, and he stood up and gave some interesting history about and actually, I think he ended up supporting the bill. He may have supported it or passed on it.
He did.
So he did support it, didn't he? Yes. And so that's kind of telling where we're at. We have a history, the United States, and we need to, I think there were so many good things in that bill. You can get caught up on, again, the heated inflammatory debate that's not necessarily. And it's a decent bill. I actually had an amendment in the bill. I hope it remained on in conference committee. I need to make sure that it did. I think it did. But when you get a custom license plate in Kansas, you will, if it did remain on, you will have the option for the Ad Astra tag to be your background for a custom tag.
Yeah, the bill left the House, and we do we'll call it a mega tag bill every year. If you argued with me that we have too many custom tags, I probably wouldn't push back too hard. Used to be that you had a plate on your car, and then we allowed for personalized tags, and now you have all of these. I think every university, many of the private universities in the state, charitable causes, 4-H, and now we have just a series of other causes that are coming up. So the mega tag bill left the House. It got the "Don't Tread on Me," the yellow flag with the rattlesnake on it that goes back to colonial times. The Gadsden flag is what that's called. That came on as an amendment on the Senate side. It did have bipartisan. The bill did pass out of the Senate on bipartisan basis. Came back to the House. I think we got a conference committee on it, and it did pass. I think it's onto the governor's desk at this point. I will say this, just as I said earlier on the other debate, I didn't hear anyone pushing a racist perspective. Racism is wrong, period, full stop. This was not proposed as any sort of racist symbol. This was not proposed to be discriminatory or cause offense to someone. This is a fairly common symbol for people who value states' rights in terms of firearms, and value the Second Amendment and the ability of the states to regulate in this area. Just as we talked about the reciprocity bill, no one who supported this on the House side did so from any racial animus or any basis like that. They were people who have all been pretty staunch Second Amendment folks and who wanted it for that reason. And so the bill has passed. It's on to the governor, and she can decide whether she'll veto it with all of the tags in it, and we'll have to then reassess and see where we go from there. But that's kind of the story of the debate on that bill.
Thank you both. Is there another question from the audience?
After the election this year, we see a lot of the states responding to that with legislation that concerns access to voting. And I think that we see that from a lot of states, including Kansas. We've had some issues with that. I'm particularly going to reference the For the People Act at the federal level, which would make it easier to vote in federal elections, and congressional gerrymandering, overhaul federal campaign finance laws, various things. I noticed that there was a resolution, concurrent resolution 5015, that urged the United States Congress to reject the For the People Act. And I think both of you voted in favor of that. Could you explain your vote on that, please?
Sure. I think Representative Susan Estes probably said it best on the House side. She is the wife of Congressman Ron Estes, represents a district in Wichita. And she said there are some good things in the federal act, but ultimately it is an attempt to nationalize and federalize election law, which under the Constitution is left to the states to determine how they will run their elections. And so while there may be some good in it, ultimately that erosion of the state's ability to run their elections and make those decisions made it unsupportable, and I would agree with that. We have a long history in our country of the states deciding, other than the when, they get to decide the how of the elections and how they'll take place. And many of them have decided the when too. That's why you have some states that elect their governors in odd-numbered years as opposed to even, and they make those decisions. So I still believe that that should be an issue for the states to decide. I don't think the federal government should overreach and attempt to nationalize elections.
I agree with that, and I'll tell you, on a Friday evening, I'm reading the state constitution, and it talks about, at the county level, the collection, the poll book, and how it will be taken to Topeka by an official. I don't know what that tells you about me, Friday evening reading the state constitution, but I'm so passionate about this stuff and that we get it right. Kansas, yes, we didn't have the issues that the other states did, but we do have room for improvement in our elections. And it's not about voter suppression. Again, it's about voter accuracy. Are these people residents of Kansas? Are they legal to vote in Kansas? There's so many ways, you know, especially being a border. Franklin County's not a border state, but we're close enough that people could drive across to Missouri and vote in both places if we don't have checks and balances in place. So that's what it's about, is protecting the integrity of the ballot and making sure that every vote counts and that each person gets one vote. I was able to get a few amendments on the legislation that was passed to the governor. I hope she signs it. If not, I definitely will push for a veto override. But one of those items you may not be aware of, but we had third-party interests from out of state and some in-state that were acting as if they were county clerks and officials. They were sending out mailings for ballot applications. Some of you would get several of those applications, and it looked like it was an official application. It confused a lot of voters. Another item was a website that was set up. It looks like it's an official website, so you would apply for an advanced ballot, or you would register to vote on this website. Well, you would never know that it wasn't an official site because they send the information to the Secretary of State or to the county clerk. But in the meantime, they captured all your data, and you probably didn't even realize you gave them majority of access to the stuff that was on the machine that you were using in order to register for the application or the ballot. That is deceptive. And it should not be going on, and we should stop it. And I was able to get a couple amendments on. There's quite a few other things that those bills did in order to clean up the process and make sure that we have a fair and accurate ballot in elections in Kansas.
Thank you both. So we have about 10 minutes left, and out of respect of both of your times, and thank you again for being here, and everyone joining us here and at home, we're trying to keep this session at about an hour. I have one more question I want to ask that was submitted to us earlier this week, and that would, so if you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, that'll leave us some time for you both to have some closing comments to talk about, where we're going into veto session in May. So this question that was submitted is, Mr. Finch, I'll let you start with this question, but what is your opinion on establishing a senior care task force? How did you vote on HB 2114, and why?
Yeah, absolutely in favor of a senior care task force. I worked with Chairman Kincannon to make sure that as she worked with her counterpart in the Senate, Chairman Hildebrand, we could get a bundle of senior care bills together. There's that one. I think there's another one that increases the penalties for mistreatment of a dependent adult or financial exploitation of a dependent adult, including a senior citizen. So. Yes, I think it's absolutely important. One of the main functions that we have as a government is to protect the vulnerable, and that includes foster children, and we're working on a foster care oversight task force as well. We expect that to run when we come back in veto, and then we will have the senior care task force as well to try to help protect the elderly. So I'm absolutely in favor of it. I'm a big supporter of what Attorney General Schmidt has done to step up the protection of the elderly in our state, and we need to do more of that. Let's face it, we have a graying population. Kansas is one of those states where we're going to have a significant number of folks aging into that age range, and we need to make sure that our laws are ready and that we're protecting people, because nowadays with these and computers, it's so much easier to defraud people. It's so much easier to take advantage, and we've got to make sure that we punish the people who would seek to do that.
Thank you for the question. I did not support the task force. I absolutely support our seniors, but I felt like another committee of state legislators is not going to solve the problem. And we need solutions, not just a Band-Aid or legislators as an oversight committee. To me, it was just another layer of bureaucracy. One of the items many of the items that I do support for seniors, we have many seniors on fixed income in Kansas, and there's two pieces of legislation. One would freeze property tax for low-income seniors through a state program and for 50% or more disabled veterans. We have been pushing for that legislation for a couple of years. The Senate has passed it. We passed it last year. We weren't able to get it past the House. We're hoping in veto session that we can get it over to the House so that they can get this relief to senior citizens, especially those who want to stay in their home. It makes sense. I mean, these are solutions that we need for our seniors. Another bill that I've been working on and will continue to work on, we've passed the Senate twice, but hopefully the House will pick it up, a legislation to freeze your retirement, freeze income tax on your retirement, or just stop income tax on your retirement incomes. So your 401k and other accounts, you would not have to pay state income tax on it. It only makes sense. If you look, in fact, one of the items I came across in the statute was that Washburn University, if you have a retirement account with them, you do not pay income tax on it. Well, why do we exclude that account and not other retirement accounts? We really need to do whatever we can. We're in the top 5 states in the nation for taxing seniors. We must change that. And these are 2 ways that we can address that.
Thank you. And I'm all for that, and I think my clients would be too, Senator Tyson, so that's good news. Senator Tyson, I'll let you start. I want to give you each a few minutes here just to give us some closing comments, things you're working on, where we're going to go from here. So I'll let you begin.
Well, thank you. And I would expand on the retirement. There's a fiscal note with it, and that's the excuse that everybody uses for not voting for it. Well, the thing is, well, it passed the Senate over super majority, but the fiscal note, you have to look at this. There's 2 stories: how much money is coming in, and how much do we want to keep in the taxpayers' pockets? Okay, so we have, our revenue estimates were up $180 million over a 7-month period. $180 million over what they were estimated to increase. So right there, for 1 year, we could absolutely pay for that legislation. The other item is the spending, the out-of-control spending. I know the budget is always difficult to decide whether to vote for because there's always some good things in it, but the governor has done this. This will be the 3rd year in a row she has done this. What she does is she sends us a budget, and then if you look closely at that budget, it excludes certain items that we've been trying to get passed for many years, like increasing the salaries for developmentally disabled people that work with them, and other items in the budget too. So the heartstring items she doesn't pay for. So the legislature turns around and increases the budget, doesn't cut anything that she sent, increases the budget, putting those things in, and then you watch. She's going to put out a press release like she did last year. She's done it 2 years in a row. Why wouldn't she do it the 3rd year? She's going to chastise the legislature for passing a budget greater than what she sent us. Well, that's a lose-lose situation, and that's why I voted no on the budget, because I'm not going to allow her to come back and say, you sent me a budget larger than what I asked for. Another item, you know, that I've worked very diligently on, and thankfully it was signed into law this year. Last year it was vetoed, but it was transparency in property tax. It was kind of funny because I said in one of my updates that almost everybody's taking credit for it now, and I love that. That means it's good legislation and that we wanted it, but I did work diligently on that behind the scenes. We're starting on another effort on a couple other topics that will be close to your guys' hearts, and we're going to try to find solutions for our energy in Kansas and our school funding. At some point that needs to be addressed too. Not just how we're funding, but how how we're spending that money. Are we spending it to the best that we can for our students in the state of Kansas? There's so many issues that need to be addressed, and we need people that are willing to fight and work for solutions. We need good investments in the state of Kansas. That was another bill that came up. It may sound wonderful, but we're going to bond more money for Capers debt. So when that came across the Senate floor, I tried to run an amendment to allow people that were in Capers the option for a self-directed IRA type account, basically modeled after the TSP, the Federal Thrift Savings Plan. If any of you know people that are in it, it's a very good plan. It's self-funding. I mean, it just makes sense. So let's work together to find solutions for the state of Kansas. We can do it. We can be that shining state in the nation, and that's what I'm working for. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the Chamber for having this coffee and all of you for coming out today. It's nice to see that as we've gone along this year, there's been steadily more people in the crowd, and look forward to next year.
I think we doubled, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we did. Double, maybe triple.
Yeah.
But we'll look forward to seeing those numbers continue to rise, and thank everybody who's watching us on Facebook Live. You know, there's a lot of things that get headlines, and then there's bills that don't get a lot of headlines, but they really do matter. One of those is House Bill 2208. It concerned the change from community mental health centers to the certified community behavioral health centers. This is going to be a revolution in mental health care in our state. It's going to allow for different types of therapies to be provided and different reimbursements to be had, so that our community mental health centers like Elizabeth Layton will be able to compete with centers across the state line in Missouri to keep therapists, to provide therapies, to make sure that they're able to have those revenue streams to stay open and help people in need. That also included the rural hospital designation. The federal government has allowed for a new rural emergency hospital designation for very small hospitals. This will help increase funding to very small rural hospitals across our state and help keep them open, which is important. The Promise Act, it's House Bill 2064. Been working on that for a couple of years. We got a version, thanks to working with Senator Baumgardner, that's on the governor's desk now. That will allow for any Kansas high school graduate, and now any Kansas adult who does not have a certificate, to go to community college, trade, or tech school if they commit to living and working in Kansas for 2 years after graduation. And that was going to really help our workforce. The state of Tennessee has done this. They've become one of the leaders in economic development and recruitment for manufacturing jobs in our country because they have the workforce available to do that. And now Kansas is going to join those ranks, and we're going to create that option for people to become skilled and semi-skilled workforce in our state, which will be critical. And then Senate Bill 86 passed. That allowed for some utility bill relief for wholesale natural gas customers. It's one of a triad of bills this year that have helped to deal with the cold snap and the incredible spike in utility prices. Of course, we did Senate Bill 88, creating a low-interest loan fund for cities and municipal customers. Part of the securitization bill included relief for customers of Evergy and other investor-owned utilities. And then finally, Senate Bill 86 dealt with that kind of last gap, which was the wholesale natural gas customers. I've been proud to work on those bills to try to help provide relief for Kansas customers who should not be punished because of the failure to plan ahead by some utilities and the huge failure in the supply chain to get natural gas where it needed to be. So happy to have worked on those things. Again, they don't often make headlines, and they're not as controversial, but they're good policy that I think will help us in the field of mental health, help us in workforce development, help us in protecting Kansas customers, and that's a lot of the work that gets done up there is not the headline grabbing work. So thank you for the opportunity to serve you in Topeka.
Well, thank you both, Senator Tyson, Representative Finch. We really appreciate you being here. You don't have to give us your time, each month on these Saturdays, and you do, and you both have been over the years very engaging with our community. So we appreciate you being here, and thank you again for joining us. Do want to say thank you again to Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this, and especially our Legislative Action Committee, which many of are in attendance today. So thank you all for helping organize and put this together and being here with us this morning. Special thanks to Tiffany Evans, who's joining us this morning, Director of Ottawa Municipal Auditorium, and she's been here and allowed us to get this session out in the virtual world as well. And again, say thank you to our sponsors, Franklin County Farm Bureau Association and AT&T. So again, appreciate you all joining us this Saturday, and have a good week.